The first thing people know about you when they're managed by you is if you care about them or not. Do you care? That's the most motivating thing on this planet. That's the easiest way to build esteem is, do you care?
Chad Peterman here, and you are listening to Can't Stop the Growth, a platform for leaders and teams to grow and thrive. We highlight the importance of personal development, pursuing greatness, and always chasing your potential. Let's get into it. Hello and welcome to another episode of Can't Stop the Growth. I'm your host, Chad Peterman, and today I have a special guest that we're going to listen to. So every Tuesday here at Peterman Brothers, we do what we call Future Leaders 2.0. And essentially this is leadership training for all of our people in leadership roles. We then publish it on the podcast so that everybody can listen to it. But today is a very special episode. Our COO, Andrew Hasty, did a series that I want to bring to you on the importance of one-on-ones and the impact that it can have on your business, the impact that it can have on your people, and how it can ultimately grow your company by showing the people that you lead how much you actually care. So without further ado, we'll jump into his training. I hope you enjoy it. I know you'll get a lot out of it.
I think one of the biggest things with leadership that is a problem is that leadership is this like philosophical thing. It's an ideology, right? It's like leadership. Yeah, just be a better leader, right? And a lot of the lectures that you go to or the trainings that you attend on leadership are really typically rooted in that idea, right? It's this philosophical, soft thing. And what we don't do is we don't teach hard skills. We don't teach things that we can track ourselves and hold ourselves accountable and make ourselves better. And so the goal of this series, right, is to introduce some of those concepts to you all, right? It's to really get away from the philosophical and get into the practical, into the logical. I'm not saying that we're not going to have those conversations, and I'm not saying that Chad Peterman's not going to come up here again and have an impassioned speech about those topics. But ultimately, these are things that we want you to leave the room and be able to apply instantaneously and hold yourselves accountable. And so what I'm going to do right now is I'm going to ask you, and I'm sorry, the teacher, right, is I'm going to go ahead and ask you to do a little what we call a do now for me, okay? So your directions are, you have some reasons why employees quit on the left column, and you have some percentages that match some of those reasons. So you may need to jot down or just look over it loosely, but take some time to see if you can pair up reasons for percentages. So I'm going to ask a different question. Raise your hand if you thought that lack of meaningful work was the top reason people quit. What about lack of supportive well-being? Lack of career advancement? Lack of workplace flexibility? Inadequate compensation? Seen a couple. One of which is the CFO, interestingly enough. Unreliable colleagues, uninspiring leaders. I'm seeing the most for uninspiring leaders. Looks like 12 in this room, and a lot of hands remote. Look at that. Wow. Awesome. And then unsustainable work expectations. Yeah, it looks like 4 or 5 in the room. We talk about this a lot, right? People don't leave their jobs, they leave their managers. And I think that when I look at this and I see lack of career advancement at the very top, and then I see inadequate compensation next, and then I see uninspiring leaders, at first I was like, I can't use this graph because it needs to have uninspiring leaders first. But I think as you start to grapple with the data and you look at it and you think about it, an uninspiring leader impacts all of those factors. And my question for you today is, when it comes to lack of career advancement, inadequate compensation, lack of meaningful work, unsustainable work expectations, unreliable colleagues, lack of workplace flexibility, or lack of support for well-being, what is the easiest thing that you can do tomorrow to get ahead of these reasons that people quit? We can meet with our people. We can get in front of our people. And so we keep talking about one-on-ones. We keep talking about getting in front of them. And the reality is this, and I'm going to be harsh here. We're not doing it. We're not. And I mean we as a comprehensive we. I don't mean admin managers versus frontline managers. We're not doing one-on-ones. And so in 45 minutes, I'm not going to be able to teach you how to do an effective one-on-one. I'm just not. I'm going to go ahead and set that expectation right now. You're not going to master a one-on-one in 45 minutes. What you will master in the next 45 minutes is a commitment when you leave the room today to just doing them. What you'll master is looking at a calendar and saying, yeah, I have 15 people. How in the hell am I going to pull this off? You're going to figure that out today. So today is about the what. It's the logistics. Don't worry about the how. We'll talk a little bit about the how, but the reality is this. Chad talked last week about our people knowing their scoreboard, which would make us all coaches. When on earth are they ever going to see their scoreboard if they're not meeting with you on a consistent basis? And by the way, grabbing somebody after a departmental meeting or after a future leaders and saying you had a conversation with them, right? That's not a one-on-one. It's not. The reality is every single person in our organization should know exactly when they're meeting with their coach. And by coach, I mean manager. We're going to talk a little bit about that as well. They should know, because here's the reality. Because I went back in Service Titan and I looked at the dispatch board across the entire organization. And to me, if there's not a little blocker in there, and we'll talk about the logistics of what that works like. We already have a conversation thread with Kurt and some other folks going on with how do we track this? Because the reality is this, as leaders of leaders, the same mantra is true, which is you have to inspect what you expect, right? And so if we're asking you to have one-on-ones and our leaders are asking leaders to have one-on-ones, then that's something that has to be visible, that we track, and that we hold ourselves accountable to. I know it sounds like I'm trying to use a silver bullet here, but I'm telling you, the easiest way to get people who are uninspired, right, pissed off, confused, that feel like they're marginalized and they're not appreciated, that feel like they have no esteem, that don't love what they do, is to meet with them. And it doesn't have to be Chad or Tyler Peterman that sends them a text message or sure, that holds a certain amount of weight. But the reality is that we establish a culture where we're meeting with our people frequently and we're finding things to celebrate with them, even if it's just them. That is what keeps people. That's what makes people stick around. Because the reality is, in another survey, when you talk about managers, 43% of people, right? 43% of people left their job simply because they didn't get along with their manager. They didn't like their manager, or they thought their manager didn't like them. It didn't feel objective. It didn't feel like they were able to do all the things they wanted to do, grow in their careers and take care of their families. It's really simple. So 43% of them left one company. 14% of them left multiple companies because they did not like their manager. And then 32% thought about it, which, think about this conceptually, right? That means 88% of the time, your team, 88% of the time, your team is either thinking about leaving you, has left you, right? Or will leave another time. Now, those are a little rare to me. The 14%, I'm like, maybe this might be a you thing, right? This could possibly be a you thing, right? There is a constant variable here, and it might be you. But I mean, that blows my mind. And if we can just get in front of our people and make them feel valued and make them feel heard, but then also give them some opportunities to grow and to develop and make it feel consistent, then we'll improve. Because here's the harsh reality. Our turnover data. I think the data are what the data are, and they pretty much speak to themselves, right? So I'm not going to go and dissect what this means or what this says. I think we all have a pretty clear understanding. But the piece of this that we don't think about is how freaking expensive it is to attract, to land, to train, to grow, and to develop a new person every single time we do this. And I wonder how many times as managers we take the easy way out. And if the easiest thing to meet with our people is to meet with our people, you know what the easiest thing not to do is to meet with our people. And then guess what? They continue to suck. And then guess what we do? We feel good because they weren't good. And now either we find a reason to give them administrative HR policy to fire them, or we piss them off and disenchant them so much that they quit. Right? It's true. I know, because I've done it. Oh, well, where were the performance? Oh, well, no documentation, no pattern of intervention, right? It was just easier for them, right? For me to almost create what I would just call a sabotage, right? And then for them to become so disenchanted with their work that they finally quit and, oh my goodness, I didn't have to fire them. Wow, that's always hard. Or, oh my goodness, they got even worse and worse, and now they're showing up late every day. And now they did this. And now they said this. And so now I can fire them. 2025 is all about conversion. It's about converting calls. It's about converting our people, though, as well. It's about the metamorphosis that we have to have with our people. And the easiest way we're going to move the needle with our people, the easiest way we're going to combat this is by meeting with them. And again, you don't need more than 25 minutes. And again, I'm not going to sit up here and tell you how to do it. That'll come. It will. This will be a series with one-on-ones. But step one to running an effective one-on-one is scheduling a one-on-one. It's not scheduling a one-on-one when someone F's something up. That's a coaching opportunity. That's a one-on-one that happens outside of the one-on-one that you'll probably reflect on in the next one-on-one to see that they grew. But a one-on-one should never be a surprise. And I'm telling you right now, the number of every single time I run into a field professional, the very first thing I ask them, you got it. When was your last one-on-one? The answer one of the times I've done that before was 5 months. You know how they knew it was 5 months? Because that's when they started. 5 months. 5 months of me being able to make assumptions and presumptions and answer my own questions and fill in the blanks based upon how I want, because I didn't have a leader in front of me that was shaping and molding and helping me grow and repositioning, rewiring how I was thinking about things. The number of disgruntled situations that we could put out and extinguish, right? It's fascinating because Chad talked about the scoreboard of performance, right? But I wonder, and I'm going to get a little bit deeper here, is what about emotional and psychological performance? How much I care about what I do and the impact it has and the why behind I do it. Those things are just as important as average tickets and conversions. It's wild because I've talked to a frontline manager before about this idea of the putting out of the fires and why they can't get things done because it's this thing comes up and then this thing comes up and I have to, I'm like, there's some things that we could work on with that. But in the spirit of that, having to do that, what I wonder is, what if we had the same approach to people that were disgruntled or uninspired? What if we viewed people that were pissed off or unhappy as fires that we needed to extinguish right away? We do it when they go out on a job and they don't know what the hell they're doing. It's the same thing, because the uninspired person isn't going to want to improve at their job. And guess what they're going to suck at? You guessed it, their job. And I think in all of this, the interesting thing to me that I always ask myself is, what do you manage? Think about that for a second. Because you know what everybody tells me when I ask them, what do you manage? Everyone says the same thing. People. I'm a leader. I manage people. I'm a people manager. If you're managing processes, projects, compliance, data, problems, and information with more than 50% of your time, you're not managing people. You're managing the status quo. If you're saying that you manage people, I'm a people manager. And even if you're not a people manager, we have people in here that aren't people managers, but they're leaders, or they're going to be leaders in this organization. And maybe the future leaders of this organization aren't in this room right now. So the purpose of these meetings is actually twofold. It's not just to develop you and us, but it's actually to develop you so that you can develop the people that are going to replace you. or the people that are going to join this meeting. That's the spirit. That's what transformational leadership is all about, what servant leadership is all about. So just think about your day and your schedule and how you spend your time. And if you are indeed a manager of people on paper, and you're not doing everything you can to support, to inspire, to encourage, to empower the people that you manage, then you're not managing people. You're managing things. And I'll tell you right now, the best things in life, they ain't things. It makes me think like from Chad's talk last week. Chad talked a lot about the scoreboard and inspiring your people and showing up inspired, right? And it's like, how do we go from being a manager to this? How do we go from being a manager to a coach? I was at a conference years ago, and I was talking to these two individuals, and at the time, I was a principal still. So a lot of educators in the room, but consultants, people outside of the industry as well. And I started talking, and one of these just gentlemen said, well, what do you do for a living? And the other person said, oh, I manage, I actually manage a kids camp. And I run leadership at this kids camp. It's such a great thing. And the other gentleman said, wow, that's incredible. I also work with kids. And then the person said, oh, okay, yeah, well, what do you do? And the gentleman said, I manage a sales team. And I thought to myself, I was like, that person must not really like their job. Like, it was funny, but I thought to myself, like, wow, that's someone that's a manager and not a coach. That's someone that doesn't find value in what they're doing. That's someone that, like, when they're talking about their job, and let's be real, like, we should take the work seriously, but we should never take ourselves too seriously. Like, that is someone who's a manager. Again, jokes aside, it's like, if you can't talk about what you do and talk about how much you love it, and you're always saying something negative about it, guess what? That breeds, that manifests. And that's probably why you don't meet with your people. So how do we go from being a manager to a coach? So the what is, it's straightforward. It's, we got to get on the schedules. We got to meet with our people. The very basic breakdown of what that 25 minutes looks like, and we'll look at it here in a moment, it's really straightforward. It's a personal check-in. It's a performance overview. It's a process overview. And then it's a recap of any of the action steps or any of the things you highlighted or emphasized during your conversation. And again, if you don't do it consistently, your people are always going to be surprised. And if people are going into a meeting being surprised, what do you think they think they're meeting about? It's discipline. It's either, I'm getting fired today, which, by the way, just physiologically what happens in your body from the anxiety and the cortisol that gets released, right? It's not a good thing for our bodies. And that's why they have to be consistent. They have to know exactly what to expect when they go into it. And then eventually, you know what your people are going to do? They're going to run their own one-on-ones. And you're going to evolve from a manager into a coach, and you're going to figure out who has the capability of doing that. Who can I ask a question about? Like, who can I ask a question to, and who do I need to guide? Because I think that's the other piece in all this that we keep missing. It's the firefighter mentality, right? It's that I need to fix this, and I need to fix it now, and then I'll move on to the next one, not realizing that we are living in this endless self-fulfilling prophecy of correcting the same mistakes over and over and over again. I have a science background, big biology nerd, love biology. Learned the other day that a cocoon and a chrysalis are not the same thing. That came up at a trivia. But anyway, there's this story about a kid who comes across a butterfly cocoon. I find cocoons really interesting, and I find them such a great metaphor for this group in our conversation, because we all remember that. I don't know why, and maybe I'm making a gross assumption here, but I think we all remember like a cocoon and knowing that a caterpillar becomes a butterfly. It's something we remember as kids, right? That metamorphosis. So there's this story about a kid who comes across a cocoon in the wild, right? And they're fascinated, because we were. when we were kids, when we came across it. So they start visiting this cocoon every day because they know exactly what's going to happen, right? Eventually, I'm going to see a butterfly that comes out of that, and I want to see it happen. So the kid keeps coming back to the cocoon, keeps coming back, until one day, the kid notices a small little opening in the cocoon. Game time. It's exciting. So the kid decides to stick around for hours, watching the caterpillar struggle to get through that small opening of the cocoon. Except hours are going on, and the butterfly doesn't seem to be progressing much. In fact, all progress has ceased. With the best of intentions, the kid goes back inside the house, grabs a pair of scissors, and with slow surgical precision, cuts open the cocoon. And out easily comes the butterfly. Except there is something incredibly wrong with the butterfly. It's bloated. It looks weird. Wings are deformed. They don't seem fully formed. And so when the kid is expecting the butterfly to fly away, in fact, the butterfly doesn't fly anywhere. It actually falls to the ground and then shrivels along. And in fact, the butterfly never flies, and it spends the rest of its life crawling around. Because what the kid doesn't know is the cocoon is nature's evolutionary phase of preparing that butterfly for life. What actually happens in that small opening is the caterpillar that's now a butterfly forces itself through the hole, and then that squeezes all the fluid from the butterfly's body into its wings, which allows it to take flight. And it makes me think about how many opportunities we have to train and grow and develop people in our organization, and we don't, because it's easier to just dictate and tell them what to do. It's easier to fix their problems. It's easier to tell them what to do. Who cares if I live in this self-fulfilling prophecy, this cycle where I'm answering the same questions? Because then you know what I am? You got it. I'm productive. Getting my tasks done. I'm productive. Check. Answered another question. Check. Fixed another problem. Check. Got that done. Whereas the opposite is, if we can meet with our people and we can identify their areas of growth and we can ask them the right questions, and that, I'm telling you right now, that's hard. It takes time to figure out where your team members are. And then it takes time to figure out where they're at in their development. And then it takes time to hone your questioning, to meet them where they're at, to set them up for where they can be. Telling someone their conversion sucks, it's really easy. Asking someone to look at their own performance data and asking them where they think they should be. Well, think about that. Historically, we didn't have passive regression. No one knew what good was. And now you do. And now it's, okay, well, how do I coach to that performance? And even if you're in an admin role and you're not a frontline manager, there are database things that we can identify to ask the right questions to grow our people. But we have to be willing to be patient. And we have to be willing to put in the time and to plan it. You know, something we talk about all the time is this industrial meeting complex that seemed to have happened. And these right here, these are the meetings that I would say are always the most important, is these. It's these and one-on-ones. Because anything that has to pertain to growing, developing, inspiring, empowering, and encouraging our people, whether they're leaders or not, is important. It's that simple. Asking the right questions, because then what we're going to do is we're going to create problem solvers. We're going to empower problem solvers instead of solving everyone else's problems. But let's bring it back full circle now. The only way you're going to be able to do that and make legitimate progress with your people is by meeting with them. And so I would ask yourself, as you go through your day and you go through your processes and you go through the things you work on, and when you do, ask yourself, am I managing things or am I managing people? Truthfully, I don't even know what my job was when it first started. I think I'm still figuring it out. But in every conversation I've had with every leader across the country at different organizations in this industry, the same trend keeps coming up. It's the same thing. Your job is to support everyone else. That's my job. To support the people in this room and to support the people in this organization. And your job's the same, is to support your teams. So if you're going and you're dictating to your teams all the time on what to do, right? One of two things is happening there. Either your team members are not where they're supposed to be, and that could be a reflection of you, or you're doing everything for them, which is a reflection of you. So the what is have the conversation. We're going to do that step one. Just like passive progression, when we were looking at passive progression, we were like, oh my gosh, there's competencies, there's KPIs, there's all these things. If we threw this out at the field professionals all at once, they would become so inundated and they'd so disenchanted they wouldn't want to do anything, right? It's too much. It's overwhelming, right? It's burdening. Burdensome. So we're going to do the same thing with effective one-on-ones. If you are a coach, and you are a person who manages people, we need to get together and we need to figure out how are you going to provide support to all your people? And guess what? You're going to have some really cruddy one-on-ones. Your one-on-ones are going to be awful. And that is the most exciting thing I have probably said this year. We're going to have some shitty one-on-ones, and I can't wait. I can't wait because we have to embody and demonstrate the very thing we're doing with our teams, which is that we all need to grow and get better. We had an instructor in this building who looked me dead in the face one time and said, well, I always have to know the answer. But they asked me something like, oh, I'll have to come up with something. And I said, are you open to some feedback? Because the absolute worst thing we can do for our people is that. The absolute best thing we can do is show them that we're not perfect, that we're learning as well, that we're growing as well, and that we make mistakes. Because we do. So, step one, schedule our one-on-ones. That's step one. And right now, that's all I want you to think about, is getting in front of my people as consistently as humanly possible. But the excuse can't be, or the result of this can't be, well, there's too many of them. We have to figure out how to do it. And that's where I, as a leader, have to help you. And that's where your managers have to help you. But we have to do it. We can't over-index and say, there's too many people, that's not sustainable, or I have this thing. Well, actually, if I meet one person from 7 to 7:25 and another from 7:30 to 7, well, then this call comes in and then find someone to cover during that time. Step one is what? Step two is how. Slideshow error number one, words on a page. This makes me sick. Please don't start reading. I don't like this. Just trying to give you a snapshot of what we're thinking about and looking at in the future, right? And that is, how can I structure an effective one-on-one in 25 minutes? That's how you do it. You have a personal check-in. Here's some questions. Do I need to ask for all those questions? Nope. Just some things that you could talk to them about. Part number two, maybe 8 minutes of my time. Well, actually, let me backtrack because part number one is really hard for me personally. Because part number one, 5 minutes can become 15 minutes really quickly. One thing, you're asking about how Halloween was, and the next minute, you're 20 minutes into the conversation talking about some kid stealing all the candy from the neighbors, right? Number one is hard. Personal check-in. But if you care, the first thing people know about you when they're managed by you is if you care about them or not. Do you care? That's the most motivating thing on this planet. That's the easiest way to build esteem is, do you care? They'll know it. You don't even have to tell them. They'll know if you care, just by the questions you ask. Part number two, performance review. Look at their data. Look at their performance. And if they're a high performer who's self-reflective, then ask them questions. If they're green and they don't know what they're doing, guide them to the area and then still let them self-identify what they need to work on. Part number three, process evaluation. What are your workflows? How can we what can we fix to make your life easier? You could be a field professional or an admin employee running dispatch. It doesn't matter. There are things that we can do because then they feel heard. Hey, what are you struggling with in the Peterman way process that I can provide some insight or help on? And then targeted next steps and then a wrap up and summary. It's 25 minutes. Again, the challenge for me is making part one only last 5 minutes. Part number two is really hard. This is the part we skip. This is the part we wait for you to suck, and then we write you up, and then we feel guilt-free getting you fired or you quitting, right? Part number 2 is hard. That's where crucial conversations come in. Part number 3 as well. So, step 1, meet with them consistently. Get it on the calendar and start running some really cruddy one-on-ones. Because the only way you're going to get better at running effective one-on-ones is by doing it. And then they'll be able to see the evolution. They'll be able to notice that all of a sudden you're using a tracker to track what they actually talked about. So then when you meet with them the next time, you can refer back to it. Hey, 2 weeks ago when we met about this, we were talking about your membership conversion rate. How's that been going? And when they're like, I don't know, it's like, well, what did the data say? Like, holy crap. I improved by 10%. Yeah, you did. Proud of you. It's like they get to start learning how to celebrate their own wins and their own accomplishments, right? So step 1 is meet with them. And then we'll start talking about step 2, 3, 4, and 5, which is how we do it. What I'm going to leave us with today is a mantra that I talk to Chad and Michael about this every morning, it feels like, where it's like the parallels between what we do in one industry just feel like they always cross over, right? I think about these parallels and really at the end of the day, we're teachers, we're coaches, we're motivators. That's what we're here to do. So the quote I'm going to leave you with today is this, which is your team, their successes are theirs. Those are theirs. Let them have their successes. Celebrate them, acknowledge them, identify them, let them self-identify them. Their successes are theirs. And this part's tough. But if we can get to this place, it'll set us up for success. Their failures are yours. When someone does or doesn't do something, instead of thinking it's a them thing, flip the script and say, their action or inaction is a reflection of me. So what am I doing or not doing that's promoting this action or inaction? Their successes are theirs and their failures are yours. Start getting into our schedules. Start scheduling your one-on-ones. If they're great, let me know about it. That's awesome too. I'm not saying that the expectation is to run a cruddy one-on-one, but for some of us that haven't done them consistently, that's what's going to happen. And you're going to get better at it.
Thanks for tuning in. If you'd like to get connected, you can find me at chadmpeterman.com. To see what our team's up to, you can visit petermanbros.com. As always, keep growing out there.